Thank God it's Friday. It's a special Friday because it's, well, happy Eid al-Fitr. I believe that's the right greetings for today for our Muslim viewers. Congratulations, you made it through those 40 days of fast. And, well, may God answer our prayers. I think that's what you say every day. May God answer all our prayers, with the Christians, the Muslims, and all. But it's a good day to do business, even though it's a public holiday. Things are still happening around the world and all, starting with, of course, the conflict, the geopolitical conflict, which may seem far away from countries like Nigeria or the African continent, but the impact is very close to us. And that's why we're starting with that this morning, seeing what's happening in the oil space. Prices fell as leading European nations and Japan offered to join efforts to secure safe passage for ships through the Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. outlined moves to boost oil supply. So we know that the Prime Minister of Japan was with President Donald Trump yesterday, and she didn't sound as harsh as, she sounded when they said they will not contribute to the military efforts to safeguard the Strait of Hormuz. But I guess there's a bit of turn right there after those two leaders met at the White House yesterday. Well, the U.S. is looking to curb soaring oil prices, and the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, says that the U.S. may soon remove sanctions from Iranian oil stranded on the tankers, and said that the further release of crude from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve was also a possibility that is being touted at this time. So what has that done to oil prices? We see price has gone. Yesterday was, we saw Brent hit $119 for a barrel. Wow, that's a lot, and it's scary. And so some people are saying, oh, for a country like Nigeria, there's going to be revenue. But have you thought of the price or the cost at the pump and what that would do to inflation, not just in Nigeria, but globally? African countries, everybody connected to importation, to the dollar. You know, it's a scary scene. But we see a little bit of drop here compared to what we had towards the evening of yesterday. It's now at $107.80 a barrel. WTI, $95, it dropped. So we will notice, and this has been happening, I believe, since the beginning of this week, when we've seen the United States intentionally try to boost supply, either from their reserve or of compromising or giving some waivers to allow more supply into the United States. And we know, of course, the United States deals with WTI. So we've seen the price of WTI not soaring as much as Brent. So that's why we see it at $95 and dropping 1.1%. But still, for the week, benchmark Brent is on track to rise nearly 5% after Iran hit oil and gas facilities in the Gulf states, forcing production to be curtailed. And in a joint statement, after earlier hesitating, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Japan, they've expressed their readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the strait, through which 20% of the world's oil and LNG transit. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has said that he had told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to repeat attacks on Iranian energy infrastructure. And I believe Israel said they will heed to that. But, amidst all of this, sometimes they say, when life gives you lime, you make it into lemonade. So let's see if there's any lemonade in all of this, especially for Africa or investors in Africa. And we have joining us in the studio to discuss this Dr. Jerry Iguilo. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Misena Capital Limited. Dr. Iguilo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Annie. Nice seeing you.
Great to have you here. So it doesn't look like it's a lot of good news. So there at least has to be a hedge somewhere. What should investors be doing now amidst all the soaring oil prices? And I think some people are still making money betting, what do they call it, longing and shorting for oil prices. But as investors, especially on the African continent, Can we hedge? Is there anywhere to hide from all of this?
Thank you, Annie, for that question. I think more importantly, I think we need to just understand the concept and how we got to this point. And more importantly, for us Nigerians, we might see this war as a distant Middle Eastern story. Unfortunately, that is not where the story ends. For Nigerians, yes, it's a crude oil price story. It's an inflation story. It's also an exchange rate story. But more importantly, is the story of how this impacts and the purchasing power of the Nigerian household. So you've asked the question, is there a hiding place? Unfortunately, we are in a global environment where the global economic environment is charged. Unfortunately, the events that we have seen in the that caused the increase in crude prices are not within our control. Yes, some might argue that it's good for us because we're going to make more revenue for the country. However, there's a lag effect from when that revenue begins to hit the pocket of our households. But immediate effect is that our cost of transportation has increased, cost of living, food prices are going up. So what can we do? As investors, I think the most important thing to do right now is not to panic. That is very important. And without panicking gives you an opportunity to sit down with your investment advisors to discuss strategy. This is a time for strategy. You sit down and you understand that we're in a volatile global environment. So what do you do first? The first and most important thing is to preserve capital. You need to preserve your capital. You need to begin to think of liquidity. This is the time where we say cash is king. So there will be a lot of move towards your short-term treasury bills type investment where you need to find cash and park it because, of course, we are in an uncertain global environment. So there might be opportunities in the short term that you might want to take up. Of course, you need liquidity. So first thing first, you need to have calmness and begin to think of how do I preserve my investments.
So there's gold, but we haven't seen gold move as fast as it did some months ago. I believe we saw a little bit of drop under the 5,000. That's been, the record high. We have the equities market. We've seen Nigeria's equities market, even in the face of all of this soaring. They say it's the pension fund. I don't know if it's the FDI. But when you look at, you mentioned the treasury bill, the fixed income market, that could also be a possibility. When you look at this basket of possibilities, where should I go as an investor?
Well, I think most important, like I said, is a point of strategy. Very important. Now, you spoke of equity. Yes, in today's equity world, of course, it's very interesting that Nigerian equity is continuing to hold. However, because we are an emerging market, we're not sure how the market will turn in the short term. That is why when you invest in equity today, you need to be very strategic. Of course, we see the increase in oil prices. So which companies are benefiting? So you target those good oil and gas companies that are listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. So that you can also benefit from some of those gains they are making from the increase in crude prices. Of course, if you haven't invested now, you are investing late. But it's still good because you can still capture some of those. And then when you say gold, yes, gold has always been a store of value in an uncertain environment. And of course, there's that need to rush into gold. But one thing also that is happening is that most people are moving into cash position. Because in an uncertain environment, your cash is king. I think we can see what has happened in Dubai. If you don't have liquidity, it's a big challenge. So the first thing really that needs to happen is that we need to move into liquid environment. When you want to target your equity investment, you target companies that are going to benefit from this environment, volatile environment, but more important than what we call defensive stocks. Defensive stocks are your stocks that have to do with things that we use daily. Food, for example, infrastructure, warehousing, things that generally also they're not luxury. So stay away from luxury in this global environment. Everyone needs to be cautious. I say we should be cautiously optimistic.
So you talk about liquidity, cash is king. when you have cash, aren't you just cheating yourself? Because then it starts losing value, especially with all of this. We expect inflation to skyrocket, whether this ends or is still continuing.
Yes. So in today's environment, if you look at Nigerian short-term treasury bills, they're still within, up to the top of 20%, returns. So if you look at our inflation where it is today, we still look, so in real terms, you still have about 5%. So that's why I say, in the short term, your cash is king, especially in the Nigerian environment, because the return is still very solid. Yes, with inflation, of course, we know that with the increase in crude prices, we've seen the petrol prices gone up, which means we're going to begin to see gradual food price inflation, and of course general inflation, and even global inflation to say the least. But the most important thing is that in an uncertain world, you need to make sure you have liquidity, because that is when you have to preserve. The strategy has to change to preserving your capital, but also playing in your strategic portfolios of equities, but choosing the right equities to invest in, not chasing fast income or chasing quick returns on equity.
But is it too late now to get into the markets, any of these markets?
Of course, it's never too late to enter in the market.
But the best time you could have started investment is yesterday.
Of course, depending on where you are investing. One thing about market timing is either too early or you are too late. But the most important thing, if you have a long-term strategy on your investment, you can get into the market at any given time, have a long view, and of course, over time, it's expected that your portfolio will average out, and then you're going to be on the positive side in the long term.
So another conversation that's coming to light at this time is intra-African activities, transactions, trade, and all of that. Because if you had more of within the continent, then you are, to some degree, you eliminate the risks that you are exposed to. I wonder if we're to look at the continent, what opportunities you think investors could have at this time?
So from that context, I think that one thing that we need to remember is that the global, the geopolitical environment we're in does not matter whether you're an African or not. It's a global challenge. The cost of energy globally has gone up, so it affects everyone, and it's not within our control. Having said that, Africa intertrade is something that we Africans must, and at some point, begin to give critical attention to. Because if we trade together, the market is bigger. We're about 1.5 billion people, and that gives us an opportunity to really reduce the cost of transaction costs between the countries within Africa, and that also makes businesses within Africa much more profitable. So I believe that having inter-African trade, or increasing or investing in inter-African and intra-African trade is a very good thing to do at this moment. However, we just need to understand that the environment we are in is not controlled by outcomes or events within Africa.
All right, Dr. Jerry Grillo, Chief Executive Officer of Messena Capital Limited, thank you so much for those tips this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Annie, for having me. Have a great day.
Great. And now, well, let's do a bit of recap of what has been happening. The state visit by President Bola Tinubu. Yes, and after his 2-day state visit to the United Kingdom on the invitation of King Charles III, the president, who arrived earlier today in the wee hours of today, was accompanied by his wife, the First Lady, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, received by top government officials, including the Senate President, who was there with them, Godswill Akpabio, the Chief of Staff, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, as well as senior officials, security chiefs, and this happened at the presidential wing of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. During his visits, of course, we know, to the United Kingdom, he had high-level talks with the United Kingdom monarch and the government executive, discussions on strengthening bilateral trade ties, enhancing security cooperation, boosting economic cooperation between both countries. And the visit saw engagements with government officials and Nigerians in diaspora, as well as business leaders, and discussions centered on investment, trade, Nigeria's ongoing economic reforms. The presidency says the trip is expected to unlock new opportunities across key sectors of the economy. And the trip, they say, is expected to also support Nigeria's ongoing economic reform agenda and attract foreign direct investment into the economy. Meanwhile, the presidency is expected to release a detailed communique outlining the key diplomatic and economic breakthroughs achieved during the state visit. One of the highlights of the meeting of the president there in the United Kingdom is the signing of an MOU to revamp the Lagos ports. That was sealed in the presence of President Bola Tinubu there in the United Kingdom. He proceeded to engage in a high-level meeting with the Prime Minister there, Minister Keir Starmer, and the president was welcomed at the door, and then we had that signing at Downing Street, number 10 Downing Street, and our correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, put this together for us.
Day 2 of President Bola Tinubu's state visit to the UK centered around settling down to business. He said goodbye to King Charles and Queen Camilla and headed for number 10 Downing Street, where he met with the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who was waiting for him, standing on the red carpet that draped the steps to the entrance. Both men posed for pictures before President Tinubu was invited in. Mrs. Starmer hailed the state visit by the president as historic.
We have a lot of work that we already do on the economy, on defence and security, but today is the opportunity to take that to another level.
What we are facing is not a small challenge. Currently, the entire world is challenged. And Nigeria is not immune, so is Britain is not immune.
They both agreed a record-breaking steel deal under which British Steel will supply 120,000 tons of steel to refurbish 2 major ports in Lagos with a contract worth £70 million. Earlier in the day, President Tinubu witnessed the finalization and signing of a £746 million financing agreement. President Bola Tinubu also witnessed the finalization and signing of a £746 million financing agreement designed to fund the development of the Lagos Port Complex and Tinkan Island Port Complex. The signing was led by the Minister of Finance, Mr. Wale Edun, and Citibank. He later addressed a room filled with UK and Nigerian diplomats, members of his entourage and Nigerians in diaspora, assuring them that change had begun and soon they will begin to see it. And while the president got through with his itinerary for the day, the First Lady, Oluremi Tinubu, delivered a message of unity and faith to a gathering of religious leaders at Lambeth Palace, the historic seat of the Archbishop of Canterbury. In her address, she emphasized the importance of listening and finding value in every individual, regardless of background or belief. She told them, "We have to learn to listen to each other and try to get the good out of everyone, irrespective of who we are or who we worship." She later engaged with leaders of the Church of England, including the first black woman to become a bishop in the Church of England, Bishop Rose Josephine Hudson Wilkin, and Bishop Emma Innocent, Bishop of Kensington, and the area bishop for West London. Amarachi Ubani, Channels Television News.
As you would guess, that agreement or deal on upgrading Lagos Port is of a big interest to us. Afterwards, our correspondent there in London, Juliana Olayinka, had a word with the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy to give us more details about that deal that was signed.
We have a financing for the port sector. Tin Can Port is 50 years old. Apapa about 100 years old. They need refurbishment, they need renewal, even reconstruction. So there is a project finance arrangement supported and guaranteed by the UK Export Finance Facility. And effectively, what that does, it makes the investment in the port and the renewal of the port something that will bring revenue that will pay for the loan. So in effect, it's a self-financing project, and these are the types of projects, these are the types of investments and initiatives we want to see more of. Where there's a loan, it is used to create more revenue that repays that loan.
Well, I'm so glad that the minister there emphasized the fact that it's a loan. That means we'll have to pay back. That's, I think, about £760 million. Nigeria will be paying that back, and I believe it will have some sort of interest on that. But the minister there also did talk about the fact that this should be a self-financing loan. So imagine if the ports are upgraded and more business is being done there. Revenue generated from there should improve and should be able, you know, to deal with payment or repayment of that loan. And that is what we actually do hope will happen at the end of the day. Unfortunately, most of the times, you know, these details are not so revealed. And, you know, the workability, the timelines and all of that, so that journalists can ask questions and push for answers from the government especially. But let's hope this will be different. There's always the first time, yeah, of being optimistic. We hope that's what we'll see. Let's take a break now. When we come back on the other side, 2 weeks ago or so, we discussed the issue of family business and sustaining the business that has been started. Of course, without those businesses, then the economy feels that gap that has been created. We'll talk about a conference that may help you do that by the Lagos Business School. After the break, please stay with us. Survival, how can a business you created outlive you? That's what the Lagos Business School intends to cover at the International Family Business Conference for 2026, and it's titled Beyond Survival, Governance Culture as the Foundation of Lasting Family Legacies. And we have right here in the studio the director of LBS Family Business Initiative, Dr. Okenwuke. Dr. Okenwuke, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Good to have you here. I think the first thing is, why is this important? Why are we discussing this to start with?
I think if I listened to part of the earlier program talking about businesses and all of that, the challenge we have is you have family businesses actually make up the bulk of businesses in the world, not just in Nigeria. In Nigeria more so. So if family businesses are not doing well, the economy will not do well, no matter what you do. So it's important that, you know, what is important for family businesses that make up over 70% of GDP, over 80% of businesses that register are family businesses. And that the challenge historically that have been noted that many of them struggle to survive between the first and second generations. Over 70% fail, as in completely wiped out. And if you know the magnitude of that, you know, it's important that different things are done today, perhaps to begin to reduce that mortality rate. So it's important what we're trying to do, bring family business owners and players in that ecosystem together in one room. They have peculiar issues, but it's common to most of them. It's not like one person, or, you know, like we say in Nigeria, it's not your family, village people. No, there are things that need to be done, and many of them have the same challenges. But when they sit together and talk, people learn from each other, their successes, their challenges. what you're struggling with, another person has done it before. So instead of repeating that problem phase, it's important to learn from people who have done it. And we found out in the last 3 years or so that we started this conference, I mean, extremely relevant and useful. And we get those feedback from people that have been on the program. And they don't fail to attend the next one because they always learn. They bring their children, they bring their spouses and all of that. And everybody gets to think long term and sustainability, when it comes to the family business.
And I guess that's why you have this as your theme, Beyond Survival, because a lot of times it seems these businesses, family businesses, are viewed as, I just want to survive, send my children to school, so because of that I open a shop, and there's really no long-term planning. But I guess we still have some examples of businesses, family businesses that have survived generations.
Yeah, first of all, to your point about that survival, it's true that when you start up a business, first you want to survive because you have to have customers, you have to have people, you need to have cash flow coming in and out, pay your bills and all. That's the first thing. But beyond that, if you ask the question to every successful family business owner, they didn't start it just to survive. They have big dreams. You want to be here, hand it over to the next generation.
Must that dream start at the initial stage, or can it be acquired along the way?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. Some are lucky that they start the dream from day one, even though they're starting the business as small. They have long-term view. Some might just start as, okay, and it works. And then they begin to see, if the thing is succeeding, why can't I keep that success going on? So it's not, there are no fixed, method to it. Some start at the beginning, think big, long-term. Some start, just like an accidental entrepreneurial drive. It happens also. Then you begin to see it succeed. Then you begin to plan long-term for it. Now, in terms of a business that have survived, some of them have survived. In Nigeria, not so many, but we're also trying to do, Integral Business could have a research, a compendium of family business that have gone from one generation to the other. We're trying to do that now. But historically, a lot of failures happen, in our environment. That, like I said, between that first and second generation, more than 70–80%, you don't hear about them again. Now, if you see the list of business that you know when you are growing up, how many of them are still in business today? Just mental exercise, not many. But across the world, family business have survived. The older family business today, I think from Japan, over 1,850 years. So that means it's been around, but it's a changed form from what they started with, not what they do. But they're still, you can still trace it back to where you started from. Right? So business in Nigeria, the larger business in Nigeria, of course, the family business. This studio where we are sitting today, it's a family business. I'm going to talk to that because the keynote speaker for our conference this year is the chairman of a channel media group, Dr. John Momo. He was gracious to accept our invitation to come because we are particular about the people that we invite to do that. So it's also a family business that is, you can see the plan. If you talk to him, you can see he had plans. And those plans are being implemented. So you have the larger business in Nigeria being a family business by far. Everybody knows Dangote is a family business. It's largest by far in Africa. So business can start small and it can be big. So it is not, a family business does not necessarily have to be small. It can start small. If your ideas are bigger than even that state, when you started small, of course you can make that idea happen, that particular way.
So I guess we should define what we call a family business.
Okay.
Because I had a conversation with a lawyer from, one of the companies some weeks ago about this family business and the sustenance of it. And I guess that is where some people just need to be reoriented.
Okay.
When you say it's a family business, must you have family members running the daily operation?
Okay.
Or is it, in what way? What makes it a family business? So that we can now understand that maybe over time, as generations come and generations go, there might be, as you said, a difference in the participation, but it's still a family business.
Okay. First of all, the primary criterion is it is owned by a family. It can be run by a family, but not necessarily so. So I hope you get the point. Once the business is owned, fundamental of majority ownership is that of a family. Now, so it's a family business. Now, you can also see in the early stages, it can be, if you go into a business and see a business where you see the members of the family more than one or two in the senior position, without looking at the registration and all of that, you know it's a family business. But that is not a defining criterion. is like most times it happens at the early stages, but as family businesses grow, it does not have to be run by a member of the family. But you see the members of the family owning it, and of course running the board. The board appoints management. So the members of the family can choose not to run it on a day-to-day as executives, but they run the board. They put the governance structure in place that appoints management and of course changes them as the case may be. So the key thing for for general definition is that ownership or dominant ownership by a family block, who are also in charge of. If you look at the board, you also see that family represented at that board, primarily, of course, but not necessarily at the executive level. It can happen that the members of the family are running it at the executive level, but it's not. So if a member of the family are not keen on executive operations, it does not take away that definition of family business, as long as the family still owns it, in terms of majority holding and governance structure.
So what have you noticed in your study of family businesses in Nigeria? What are those weaknesses that have led to this death, collapse, of most of family businesses?
The critical elements, if you look at the family business, like there are two blocks in the family business. They have the business and the family, and they're very important blocks. In a non-family owned business, you only have the business. I mean, of course, you have the shareholders and the management. But in a family-owned business, you have the shareholders, who may be family, fundamentally, but you have a family as an important block that also has an impact in the business. Most times, to your question, most failure we found in family businesses start from failure in the family. That family is not organized. You need to govern that family that owns the business. It's not like everybody everybody is unique. Typically in our world, you don't compare children, you don't compare, everybody is separate. But in business, you do appraisals. You select the best person in one position, you pay incentives based on output. But in the family, most family businesses that fail don't realize that they need to run that business as a business. People that will run the business as executive need to be not just blood, but capable to run the business. That my father is a family business owner does not, and I'm the first son or first daughter, as the case may be in our environment, does not qualify me to run the business. I'm a shareholder, nobody will take away that right from me. But to run the business, I need to be competent and interested. Two things. I need to be interested and also competent. If I'm not, and you just put me there because I'm the first son, the business naturally will fail. I mean, there's something I always tell my friends that run businesses. You can pass wealth to your children. You cannot pass your intelligence, experience to your children. They have to earn it. So if they don't have that competence to run the business and you put them to run the business, naturally the business will fail. It's just a matter of time. And all the cases that I have seen, you can see that. Or you don't also prepare succession. And then maybe as I'm coming to China today, I'm doing all the business, I have an accident and I die. Then what happens to the business? In our environment, somebody say, God forbid.
I almost heard you say that. I just said so, actually.
But God forbid is not a strategy. You have to say, if I die, what happens? Who takes over the business? It's something you have to discuss. But when we rely on that, natural, God forbid, it eventually will die. Whether it's today or tomorrow, someday the person will die. Who takes over the business after? It needs to be discussed and agree and planned for.
So the need to separate the sentiment between the family and the business, that's what I hear you say. And of course, some of our cultural beliefs, you don't want to talk about death and plan for that period and all of that. But I mean, I think you also mentioned this, that it's a family business. It's not compulsory that members of the family must run it. No. They can own it and make decisions.
And appoint people to run it.
And appoint people to run it. I believe that is something that we really need to drum out there, because, I mean, the natural instinct is if it's a family business and family members must run it, or else it's not. But that also brings the issue of corporate governance. Right. That has to be, put out there without sentiments. But I think that's another difficult, because in Nigeria or Africans, I think we're really sentimental.
But to your point now, if you look at the theme of the conference, you see governance and culture. When you ask culture, what is culture? What we do every time. That becomes our culture. A culture of a family, my family can be different from the culture of your own family. But if I have a business as a family, then governance is important as to who does and how do you hire people. Even if I'm a family member, what qualification do I need to have to enter the business? How do I get promoted? Do you pay me at an entry level more than what you pay the managing director from outside? It cannot, if you do that, you're also creating problem for the business. I mean, I advise, so when you talk about governance, if I'm coming into the family business, I'm coming as a professional. Of course, if I'm from the family and I'm qualified, I get the first right of refusal, as we say. But if I'm from the family and I'm not qualified, it will be injurious to both myself and to the business to put me in a position. Because one, I will also run into a problem, and the business will run into a problem. So governance is very critical. Selecting who joins the business, how the person joins the business. Boards, a lot of family businesses in Nigeria don't have boards. Maybe with any research you do, not more than 20% are even thinking of boards. But they tell you what is the value of boards. But you think you need to have boards. Even the CEO needs to have somebody he's accountable to. Even all of us, it's only God that does not have somebody that he reports to. But if another person has somebody that, not reporting in the sense, but you bounce ideas off. You bring somebody say, okay, have you thought about this? You can be blindsided because we are chasing an objective. But that board helps you to, give you a complete view. So governance is a challenge. That part of
I think the sentiment around that is you're chipping off the power that the CEO or the owner of business would have had.
Absolutely.
If you have a board that you have to be reporting, well, I don't know if you say reporting to, but at least, like that check and balance. And that, of course, goes to the issue of culture,
sure.
That we have. But when we talk about legacy and all of that, what really this time in this world, in this part of the world especially, what does it mean?
When you talk about legacy, it goes back to what have been your dream? What do you want to be known for? I mean, I want
to be known that I started a business and I'm rich. Is that a good enough legacy?
Once you make money, find out it's no longer a legacy. When you are coming from an impoverished background, sometimes we think once I make money, no. But once I have money, find out what is the purpose of the money. What am I? If I'm not there today, how will people remember me? If you remember the story of the gentleman who's when people know Nobel Right and all that, that story. The guy got to it. So people thought he died. It was his brother that died. The one that was the physicist. But everything people say was very terrible things about the brother. But they thought it was him. So he now said, "Wow, so if I die, this is what people are going to say about me." He had to now change and start doing things that have purpose. So what is the purpose of the business? Why were you set up? What do you want to achieve? Even today, your children, if there are no purpose in the business, your children that you've taken abroad to study, they won't want to join your business because they've been exposed to the point of what am I doing what am I achieving in this business? So going back to the point of legacy. When you are not there today, you want to know how will people remember me? How will the community? There are some people that you go to, I know a business that in one community they were working, there was a riot. The community people came and protected that factory. That nothing will happen to that factory. Why? Because that factory was alive. Gave them purpose. Solved their problems. So it must have something beyond just money. Money in itself doesn't give peace of mind. But those things you wanted to set out as the owner of the business, how are you able to do that? What structures your business? It goes back to the culture we're talking about. It goes back to governance. Because governance is what I will help you to see beyond today's problems. There are problems every day today. But you need to step away from today's problems and go into the long term. How do I want to be known? When people write about my business and me as the founder, what would they be saying? And it goes back to now to the legacy you want to keep it beyond just having money. And
these are the conversations you're going to be having at the conference next week?
Absolutely. On Thursday, 26th of March at the EcoBank Pan-African Center in Victoria Island, Zimbabwe. It starts at 8 a.m. By the way, I've not mentioned, our keynote speaker, we selected people, both the keynote, the moderators, and the panels. Like I said, John Momo will be our keynote speaker. So for people that are his followers, it's an opportunity for you to come and hear him. And they also have moderators that, one of them, probably Kunle Lebute, the former chairman of the KPMG Africa, will be moderating one panel. They have Dr. Belinda who is also the director of the Lagos Business School Hospitality Initiative, directing one. So I'll give you the names. If you see the names of people, we select people that will speak from their experience. It's not a training. It's experiential. People are saying what they do and how they do things, how they're managing their own succession in their family, how their children are coming in or not interested in coming in. So you're going to hear it straight from them because you create an avenue for all of them, for people to come together and talk.
All right, we certainly wish you the very best, Dr. Okenwoke, Director of LBS Family Business Initiative. We wish you the very best in your conference.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Let's take a break now. When we come back, we'll go global. Please stay with us. So let's go global now. We're starting with Israel saying that it will no longer target energy infrastructure after an attack on an Iranian gas field that sparked retaliatory strikes against energy assets across the Middle East, causing oil and gas prices to surge and prompting a rebuke from President Donald Trump. They said that they acted alone, according to the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He said that at a press conference yesterday after Israeli officials previously said that they had informed the U.S. about the attack. And talking about the United States, they may permit sanctioned Iranian oil currently stored on vessels to enter the market as part of efforts to manage rising crude prices. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said that there were approximately 130 million barrels of Iranian oil on water that could be utilized to keep prices down. And the Treasury Secretary indicates that the U.S. has allowed Iranian oil to continue flowing out of the Gulf despite ongoing tensions. And the comment, of course, came after benchmark. We saw prices yesterday jump to above $119 for a barrel. Let's see how all of this is affecting the markets in the United States. Our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, has this to say.
The U.S. stock market was still in the red on Thursday as the Dow Jones was down at 0.4%, the S&P 500 was down at 0.3%, and the heavy tech Nasdaq was also down at 0.3%. As many investors were watching to see what the oil prices, as there seems to be a taming down in the gains we saw earlier in the week, as this could be due to the fact that there is some de-escalation in the tension in the Middle East. As many investors continue to watch, as Wednesday was a major day of bruising of the U.S. stock market and also seeing a steadying of interest rates, and Chairman Powell stating that we could be seeing inflation continue over the next few months ahead. As many investors continue to watch the marketplace, they are hopeful that the U.S. economy could see a rebound in the near future.
A bit away from oil now, a wave of U.S. soybeans reached Chinese shores this year as a deal between the two countries revived trade. But the delay of President Donald Trump's visit to Beijing is clouding prospects over how long the influx will last. China brought in 1.45 million tons of U.S. soybeans in February, and that's the most since June, according to data from China Customs. And that added to 38,000 tons that arrived in January. They mark the first arrivals of a flurry of cargoes booked by state buyers after Trump and counterpart Xi Jinping struck a deal truce late in October. Now, commodities, talking about gold prices rebounded in Asian trade today, but are nursing deep weekly losses as the U.S.-Israel war on Iran raised inflation expectations and dent bets on interest rate cuts. The yellow metal had tumbled on Thursday after several major central banks flagged caution over the inflationary efforts of the Iran war. And this, in turn, fueled expectations for no interest rate cuts. We saw a lot of that yesterday in the near term, and a scenario that bodys poorly for the precious metals. Gold went up 1.2% to $4,706.99 an ounce, while gold futures rose 2.2% to $4,706.54 for an ounce. In Europe, gas prices spiked by 25% after a wave of attacks on energy infrastructure in the Middle East, and that included strikes at a key liquefied natural gas facility in Qatar. And that, of course, is threatening the price of energy on that region. German producer prices fell more than expected in February, decreasing by 3.3% on the year, according to Federal Statistics Office. They reported that today. Analysts had polled showed that they expected a 2.7% decline for the price. And Jeff Bezos is in early discussions to raise $100 billion for a new fund that's aimed at acquiring manufacturing companies and implementing AI technology to speed up their automation processes. The Amazon.com Incorporated founder has been meeting with major asset managers globally to secure funding for the initiative, according to a report from Wall Street Journal. And also related to that, the fund is described in investor documents as a manufacturing transformation vehicle. It targets companies in industrial sectors, including chip making, defense, and aerospace. The fund size will match SoftBank's $100 billion Vision Fund and exceed many of the world's largest buyout funds. Bezos was recently named co-CEO of Project Prometheus, a startup developing AI models designed to understand and stimulate the physical world. Project Prometheus separately is pursuing up to $6 billion in funding, according to analysts. Britain borrowed more than forecast in February, showing the risks facing the public finances even before the war in Iran upended the economic outlook. Spending exceeded tax revenue by £14.3 billion. That's about $19.2 billion. This is according to the Office of National Statistics. They released that earlier today. And there's also the shortfall that's predicted by economists, and double of that. And then we move over to India, where the country is considering introducing real-time foreign exchange settlements in euros at its sole international financial hub, a step that would deepen financial ties as the European Union-India trade deal progresses. The International Financial Services Center Authority, which regulates the hub, has approached the government to permit the use of euro alongside the US dollar for such settlements. Well, there are still conversations going on about this, and they said it's private at this time. South Africa has approved new import taxes to protect its steel industry after a probe found that cheap imports of some products from China and Thailand unfairly undercut local manufacturers. Trade, Industry and Competition Minister Pax Tao authorized the tariffs recommended by the country's International Trade Administration Commission, which first initiated its probe in 2024. And this is according to a notice that has been issued by the government. And some of those places perhaps that some investors might be looking to hedge is the cryptocurrency. We see Bitcoin, it's steadied near $71,000 today after falling below $69,000 in the previous session, as volatile oil prices caution over the Federal Reserve's hawkish policy outlook is weighing on risk appetite. The world's largest cryptocurrency last traded 0.3% lower at $70, 675.7. Bitcoin fell to as low as $68,000, 814 on Thursday, when a brief spike in crude prices triggered a broad retreat across risk-sensitive assets. Those are the top stories from the foreign scene. I'll be back at 1:30 to give you updates from, no, not the markets here in Nigeria. At least the markets here are still closed. But we'll have some updates from other markets around the world that are open, as well as other stories from the African scene. I'm Ini John Mekwasi at 1:30.